Today on Inspired Money.
Once again, I've often found in my life making the decision that's not popular or not popular wisdom to me ends up being the decision I need to make.
This is episode 77 with author of Financial Freedom and the creator of MillennialMoney.com, Grant Sabatier. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to help each other to live richer lives, make a greater impact, and together, we can make the world a better place. Thank you for joining me on this mission. Today we're talking with Grant Sabatier. CNBC called him the Millennial Millionaire because he went from $2.26 in his bank account to a millionaire in 5 years, reaching financial independence by age 30. He writes about personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and mindfulness, and he hosts the Financial Freedom podcast. Grant graduated from the University of Chicago and has been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, Money Magazine, and many other media outlets. Now, don't let the millennial and millennial millionaire make you think that this episode is just for millennials. I love Grant's story because it's inspiring no matter your generation. Whether you're Gen Z, millennial, Gen X, or baby boomer, today's show can give you ideas and tactics to live better financially. In this episode, you'll learn how Grant went from broke to millionaire status in just over 5 years, things he learned about himself, like what motivated him to work so hard for money early on, and how his priorities changed once he had money in the bank. And then, when it comes to budgeting and tracking little purchases, how you can make the biggest impact. Now let's get inspired with Grant Sabatier. Grant Sabatier, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
So growing up, one of my actually first memories in life, I was probably 4 or 5 years old. My father used to always have these kind of catchphrases, and they would come up at random moments, and he would say one of two things: life is a beach and money is freedom. And those two things, I didn't, as a 4 or 5 year old kid, obviously I didn't understand what either of them meant, but it was something he would continue to say throughout my childhood. And so my earliest memory was him saying money is freedom, which is so odd. And I actually had him come on my first episode of my Financial Freedom podcast, and I asked him that. I said, what did you mean by that? And my parents, grew up with very, very little. They moved to the DC suburbs to give me a better opportunity. And growing up, I knew that we didn't have a lot of money. I knew that it stressed my parents out. It was something that they talked a lot about and argued about sometimes. And, at the time when I was that age, they were both working a number of different jobs. And so money was always very, very present in my childhood and in my life, to the extent that I knew we didn't have much. And I saw my parents climbing the social ladder in a lot of ways, and go from sort of lower class to lower middle class to middle class, really all through my adulthood. And my parents actually didn't even start saving for retirement until I was in college, and they're still working today. That is some great foreshadowing. You created Millennial Money, and you're well known for going from $2.26 to $1 million in 5 years. Can we go back to the day where you had less than $3 in the bank? What was the turning point for you? Yeah, so in August 2010, I was 24. I'd bounced around a number of different jobs after college and ended up getting laid off twice and had to move back home with my parents. And they said that I could stay for 3 months. And, mind you, these are my parents who invested so much into me. And I always knew that they were making sacrifices for me to have a better life and to have more opportunities. And so to have moved back home at 24, and I remember going down to dinner one night, just like I would have as a kid, sleeping in the same bed I was sleeping in when I was 7. And just, my parents didn't even have to say anything. I could just see the look of concern on their faces and just sort of disappointment, concern, worry, even though they didn't say it. And that filled me with a level of just, it made me feel really bad. And like I'd failed myself, like I'd failed them. It was around that time that one morning I woke up and I knew I didn't have a lot of money, but often when you don't have much money, at least for me, I got anxious every time I looked at it, so I didn't look at it very often. And I woke up one morning and wanted to go to Chipotle and saw that I only had $2.26 left. And my parents had told me they wouldn't give me a dime. And so, I was like, wow, I've lost any sort of like autonomy and freedom, and I'm entirely reliant to eat now on what my parents have in the fridge. And so I made myself a turkey sandwich instead. But really low point. In the book I took a screenshot. I have this screenshot that I took that morning. It was a feeling that I wanted to remember how I felt, and so that's why I took that screenshot, and it still hangs in my closet to this day. And that was really the lowest point, and really the kind of the turnaround point where I was like, I never want to feel this way again. Ended up being insanely motivated from that point.
I saw that picture of the bank statement in your closet, and it surprised me because that's like the opposite of when someone writes themselves $1 million check and hangs it up. It's like you want to remind yourself what not to do.
Or just I wanted to remember the feeling. That I wanted to be able to take myself back there, and you can only start from where you are today, and that's where I was when I started. And so it's just a constant reminder to probably in a lot of ways not only realize how much I've grown as a person, even more so than the money, but just as kind of a gesture of gratitude, because I feel very grateful that I was able to make it through. And that's why now I have such a big heart for people who are struggling financially, and want to help them escape that feeling as well. And so it's a reminder, and that's why I wanted to put it right in the beginning of the book, because I know that a lot of people reading the book will be in the same position, and I want them to know that I hear them and that I was right there with them, and that I didn't come from money. I didn't get money. I didn't inherit money. I didn't, it's like I'm where you were, and you're where I am. So I think I wanted to just, give people some hope that no matter where you're starting from, more freedom, more time, more space in your life is possible. And you don't even need millions of dollars to do it. And that's why I wrote the book.
Grant, you were cognizant of the sacrifices that your parents made, and that was part of your motivation, that you wanted to do the right things. And in many ways, you did the right things. You went to a good school, you got a degree, but looking back, that didn't really set you up for knowing what you needed to do. So even though you came to a realization that you needed a change, what were the action items that you said, all right, I need to make a change. I have $3 in my bank account. What was your 1, 2, and 3? I need to do something differently.
Yeah. So at that time, by the time I had $2.26, I'd already sent out over 200 resumes. So it was one of those things where I'd wake up every morning at 7 a.m. most mornings and send out as many resumes, different jobs, different industries. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And interestingly, I always wanted to be a writer, but I never figured out how to do that. Which was interesting. But I sent out, tons of different industries. I was like, maybe I want to do this, maybe I want to do that. And it was kind of like I was throwing darts at a board and trying to figure out what would stick. Like if someone, like I remember applying to like an event marketing company, and I had no experience doing that. I didn't even know really, what it was. And that's something where if I had maybe gotten a job, if someone had answered one of my resumes, it probably would have changed the entire trajectory of my life. I was going to take any job that I could get. I was that desperate. So I realized that, okay, no one's responding to this. I clearly don't have a marketable skill set, or I'm not positioning my skill set the right way. And I was like redoing my resume like once a week. You know what I mean? I was like reading all about how to, I thought it was my resume, and then I realized it was my skills. And, this is 2010, so it was a tough job climate. So I realized that I was going to need to figure out a skill, and I thought very hard about, okay, should I go back to school for a skill? What should I learn how to do? And I was doing a simple Google search, around this time. And this is, I had the iPhone that I'd bought when I was previously employed, and I saw a Google mobile ad, and I'd never noticed a Google mobile ad before. And I was like, oh, what's this? This is like an ad on my phone. And like the first three positions were all ads, and it said ad. I could see it was an ad. And so then I just Googled Google ads, and the first thing that popped up was a news article about there's going to be an increase in demand for people to run Google ad campaigns, and digital marketing positions are going to grow over the next 10 years. It was like an incredible number. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is okay. There's demand for this. And then right underneath it was Google AdWords University, is what they called it at the time. And it was like basically a series of free videos and tutorials and lessons to teach you how to run Google ads. And then I saw in the sidebar that you could actually then take a test and get Google AdWords certified. And they had this like, nice little icon, little badge, and you get a certificate. And I watched the first video, like Introduction to Google AdWords, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And that was it. And over the next 30 days, I watched all those videos, more videos on YouTube. I pretty much stopped applying to jobs entirely and put all my eggs into that basket of learning Google advertising. I didn't know how hard or easy the test was going to be, and I was so worried that I was going to fail. So, I was always a hard worker. That was never my challenge. I always worked hard. So I worked really hard. I learned as much as I could about it, took the test, passed the test, got certified, put it on my LinkedIn profile, put it on my resume, and then I started applying to, literally Googled, okay, digital marketing jobs, digital marketing agency, Google campaign manager, and found a job in Chicago, which is where my girlfriend was living at the time. I had to get out of the DC area. I had to get out of my parents' house. And the first job that I applied to was a small, 25-person digital agency, and I got the job, the first one that I applied to. And the HR manager later told me that I was like so passionate about Google campaigns on the phone that they could not hire me. And I'd actually never ran a Google campaign, and it was for an entry level position to run them. And so they knew that I was certified, so I knew how to do it, and I did all that for free, and ended up getting an amazing job, making $50,000. And going in during this time, I'd also done another Google search for best money books, because I started to, once I had no money and I looked around and realized that I didn't really know anything about money, and that my parents were still working, and that all of their friends were still working. I set two really seemingly unrealistic goals: to save $1 million and retire as quickly as possible. And I didn't know how I was going to do either of those, but I knew that I was going to have to think radically differently about money, and at least learn all I could about money. And when I started researching it, I realized that a lot of the stuff out there about how to make more money was really scammy. It was really confusing. It was really didn't seem accessible. It didn't seem like I could do it. And so I started drilling down and Googled the best money books. And I ordered the first two that came up, which was Your Money or Your Life and Automatic Millionaire. And so those are the first two personal finance books that I ever read. And Your Money or Your Life was the first one, and it completely changed my life. And so this is happening while I'm getting Google AdWords certified. So by the time that I got the job, my takeaway from Your Money or Your Life, which was actually different than what Vicki Robin intended, was if you're going to trade your life energy for money, you need to try to make as much money as possible for your time. And so I was like, okay, I need to maximize the amount that I'm getting paid per hour. And by then I was already so hooked on the idea that I, needed to save as much as early and often as I could, and that I needed to live differently than most people. Because clearly living the way that everyone else lived, that's why most people don't have money saved. That's why, my parents were still working. That's why, everyone around me was still working, that they were living life a particular way. And so I was like, oh, you guys are all going right. I'm going to go left and try to figure this thing out. And I was a philosophy major in college. And so I realized that money was simply a human invention, and that we embed so much energy and power and emotion into it, and so does society. I thought, what if I just take money and strip it bare and deconstruct it and look at what it is and decide what it means to me in my life? And, that was a massive mindset shift. So when I got that $50,000 job, I started saving, 60% of my income almost immediately. And this is one of those times, this is 2010. So, there weren't other FI blogs. I didn't, I didn't know anyone that was living this way. The only person that I knew who had retired at 30 was Joe Dominguez in Your Money or Your Life, and he did it like 35 years before. And so this was something I felt really excited by, the fact that I felt like I was treading new territory. I really felt like an explorer in a lot of ways, where I was like hunting after kind of the secret to money. And I fell in love with it. I really fell in love with money as a human invention, as an idea, as a concept, as a way to make an impact in the world. And so, like anything you kind of dedicate your life to, I literally not only was trying to become financially independent, I dedicated my life to the study of money at that time.
Yeah, that's really philosophical. If we can take a step back, when you made the shift from sending out the resumes to trying to learn and teach yourself a skill, did you tell your parents? Did you tell anyone for accountability, or did you quietly make that shift on your own?
Absolutely not. I made that shift. I mean, I wasn't talking to them about anything about the jobs I was applying to. No, it was all very kind of cordial in a lot of ways. They'd maybe ask like, how's it going? But I'd be vague. So no one, I didn't need any accountability. I was so driven to escape and driven to get out.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated because you're a living example of being able to take control of your destiny. It's like you identified a skill that Google AdWords, it was something that you could teach yourself, and that it's well paying, that there was a lot of potential there. And you were able to ramp up quickly because not only did you get the job, I'm impressed that not only do you teach yourself, but you move quickly. I think in your first year, you were able to make something like $400,000. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
So I'm a really intense person. It's just how I'm wired. And so when I get on something, it becomes kind of like my singular focus in life. You know what I mean? I'm like the antithesis of like a balanced person. And that's kind of I call it kind of my superpower. But there's downsides to that as well. And so once I got focused on this path, I was just all out. And you have to remember, so I'm 24 at the time. I had a girlfriend, but I don't have like any responsibilities. I was at the bottom, and when you're at the bottom, you don't really have any other choice. So it's a confluence of factors of like the pressure, being at the bottom, not having any options, not having any other choice. So, I mean, humans are just insanely resourceful, and just think about all the things that the human race has survived, since we began, and we find ways to solve problems, we find ways out, we find ways to escape. And so I was just the level of commitment and intensity. I was really pumped that I got the job. And I was like, I'm going to live differently. I started saving money almost immediately. And that was the first time I'd really consciously saved money in that way. And I realized that This is around the time that like Mint was launching, and so I started using Mint. And this is like, I would literally just look on my phone and see my net worth increase. And, this is like my net worth when it got to like $1,000. I was just like blown away. And every morning, and I did this and I write about it in the book, every morning at that point, I was waking up, having my coffee, opening Mint, looking at my finances and setting my priorities for the day. I was starting my day with the goal to make as much money and so I could invest it as possible. And then I started getting really into that. And I realized quickly, okay, your full-time job is not going to be enough. This is just not enough money. $50,000 that's allowing me to save, but I'm like, how can I save more? That's what I was driven by. And I realized that there was a limit to how much I could cut back. I was living a really, really bare bones lifestyle, and I didn't not like it. I mean, I was fine and content. You can't really spend money when you're working all the time. And so I'd cut back and drove a really, really crappy $800 Nissan Maxima and lived in a really small apartment that my wife then girlfriend wouldn't even come over and see. And a lot of my friends just kind of laughed at the way I was living. And I was like, whatever, it didn't faze me at all. But I realized that like $50,000 was not going to be enough. So I cut back as much as I could, got to about a 60% savings rate. And then I was like, I need to focus my time on making more money. And so that's when I started hunting. And I knew that the skill set that I had developed and was developing the first 3 months, the best thing about working at a 25-person digital agency is you there's a lot of moving pieces and you can put your hands in a lot of different buckets. And so I started spending time with like the SEO guy, and started spending time with the front-end web developers and the back-end web developers, and then the sales team and the graphic design team. It was like getting an MBA in digital marketing, because I was working at this agency and I could just go and tap these people, and I would take them out to lunch and I would be like, well, how do you do this? And what about that? And can you show me? And so I learned an insane amount about all facets of digital marketing. I built my first WordPress website. And then I was like, okay, I need to make more money. So 3 months in, I searched just on Craigslist. This is how little I knew. I searched on Craigslist for website. That's all I searched for in the jobs. And I saw a posting from a lawyer in Chicago who needed a website. He had a $500 budget. And I reached out to him. I said, I can build your website in the next week for $500. And he's like, can you show me samples of your work? And all I could show him was like the first WordPress website that I built, which was basically just like a mock-up. He probably just glanced at it and was like, okay. And so I found a WordPress template and, really, really over-delivered, and he was really happy. And I made the $500. I was so pumped. It was the first money that I'd ever made on my own outside my full-time job. And I was like, this is amazing. I need to figure out how to get more of these clients. And so I asked him, and I said, hey, do you know any other lawyers who need websites? And he put out like, I think, a message on a list host, an email chain with other lawyers. And then someone invited me to like an association of attorneys, a local association of attorneys in Chicago. And so I started to get connected with some of those. And within 3 months, I sold my first $50,000 website. So this is 6 months in, and I made more money. It took me about a long weekend, about 4 days to build the website for $50,000. And I made more money in that 4 days than I was going to make the entire year in my full-time job. And it was insanely empowering.
Did that blow your mind?
Oh my gosh, I remember the day that I went down to my mailbox because I required a 50% deposit before I'd start the work. So I hadn't even started the work. I signed the contract and a $25,000 check showed up in my mail. And I remember like my palms were sweaty as I was going down to the mailbox, and I got it out and I remember looking at it and just being so blown away. I'd never held that much money in my life. Like, what? And it was a huge, huge shift for me because it was at that point I immediately took the $25,000. I deposited it in my bank. It credited 3 days later. I invested that money, and all of a sudden, I think at that time, like my net worth almost doubled. You know what I mean? And I was like, yes, like this is it. And I actually figured out, I was like, okay, I need to save $1 million. I need to sell like 25 or 30 more of these. That's all I need to do. That's how I like thought about it in my head. And I was like, how fast can I sell 30 more of these?
Yeah, you could reverse engineer that goal.
Oh, totally. And, I thought that, and I was like, okay. And then the next website I sold was like $5,000. So I didn't sell another, big project for a couple more months. But by the end of that first year, I'd made over $300,000. I'd invested 82% of the money that I had made. And at the end of that year, I stayed at the agency for 1 year. I was like, okay, I'm going to double down and focus on my own efforts. And I launched my own little digital agency, building websites for law firms and realtors in Chicago, with the value proposition that, I'm a one-person shop. I know what I'm doing. I'm hungry. I'm going to over-deliver, and I'll be at least half as expensive as the big agency. And even my agency, like, I got really tight with the sales guys. Sometimes people would call up and they'd want digital marketing help, but they didn't have the budget to work with our company. And so the sales guys gave me a couple of those projects. So I got some clients that way. And the CEO was totally cool with this because he knew I was able to service clients well. And, I think they probably thought I was going to stick around for a little longer than I did, but I left and started my own shop with the goal of focusing on those two niches. About a year later, I met two guys who were starting a consulting company focused on higher ed marketing, and I ended up partnering with them to launch another digital agency specifically focused on higher education. And then I grew that to, in 2014, I was the number one marketer of MBA programs in the world. And so I really focused. I only worked with business schools and grew that company, had a bunch of employees, were successful. And the whole time, no one knew this, but I was investing all of the money to reach financial independence. And so that $1 million goal that I had set of saving $1 million through this process, about 2.5 years in, I found my first financial independence blogger, which was Brandon from the Mad Fientist. And I found I was like, whoa, there are some other people doing what I'm doing also. And that was when my knowledge just compounded exponentially. I read everything that he had written. I found Pete from Mr. Money Mustache, read everything that he had written. And there were a few others, but it was still a crew of 10 people. It was very small. And I soaked it up and then kept treading forward. But no one in my life knew that I was doing this to get out. No one, not even my girlfriend, my parents, my friends. It was only me inside who knew that I was trying to hit the number, which I ended up calculating as 1.25 million.
You were a closeted FI guy.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, it was, I feel grateful now that there's so many support options for people. I didn't have that. I was like in the jungle alone, which made it actually more exciting for me and more challenging because I was able to push myself. And I didn't compare myself to anyone because I had no one to compare myself to, which I think in hindsight was a real advantage for me. But once I became FI, so it took me 5 years and 3 months and 6 days, I got to that point and was not only utterly burnt out and exhausted and 50 pounds overweight and tired. I was really happy that I'd made it, but I also looked around and realized that I'd worked so hard to build, money-making machines in my life. And I had 2 companies, and I had employees, and I had partners, and I had people who relied on me and, for health insurance and all these things. And I realized that I built this whole system that to escape that I was now responsible for.
How many employees did you have?
Over 20. I think it was like 27 at the height.
And you reached a point where you stepped away.
Oh, totally. So I got to FI in 2015, and then I looked around and I was like so burnt out. I was like, all right, I'm done. Like I'm ready to pack up tomorrow and go be done and do something else. Not even knowing what I would do. But I realized I'd built the infrastructure. And so instead of dismantling my companies immediately, I was like, oh, I'm going to write about this. I always wanted to be a writer, and I'd learned so much about money. I'd read over 300 personal finance and investing books at this point. And so I started Millennial Money, and that was what it was for. It was a blog where I was sharing what I learned through this process. I was obviously inspired because Mad Fientist had a blog, and there were some blogs that I had read. And so I was like, I'm going to start my own. And with the explicit goal of helping millennials, figure out money. And, with the idea of, I realized that I was like really, really hardcore and that most people weren't going to be hardcore like me. But I was like, okay, I'm not going to write about the hardcore stuff. I'm going to take all these things I learned and try to meet people where they are. And so I deconstructed all the things that had the biggest impact on me getting to financial independence. And then I made that accessible and I started writing about that because I didn't know if people would buy into the whole mission, but I knew that simply if I could convince people to increase their savings rate, that would be a huge positive, or invest in the right way, or buy a house in the right way, And so I started writing about it, not knowing what would happen with that, and systematically thinking about, okay, now how can I unwind this infrastructure? And also, I had to reconcile with myself because I worked so hard and realized that I'd built something. You get to there and you built something and you're like, whoa, now that I built something, maybe I should stick with this. All the popular wisdom again is, okay, you built a company, you made it to the top, get fat and happy, keep the company going.
Right. Open up a third one.
And that's traditional wisdom. But by this point, I knew that I honestly thought if I kept going at that rate, I would die. Like physically die, because I was working so hard. I was so intense. I was flying all over the place, and it was stressful to me to manage people and have employees. All those things I'm just not cut out to do, and didn't like it. I liked doing the work. I liked doing the digital marketing. I loved being a solopreneur, but having employees and dealing with HR issues and management issues and partnership issues and contract issues and legal issues, all that stuff just really bogged me down, and I didn't get any joy out of it. So the actual process of running a business, I didn't like at all.
Coming up, Grant talks about his changing priorities, what brings him joy, and finding his why. But first, once again, he finds himself going right when everyone else is going left.
And so I systematically, over about a year and a half, had to get comfortable with walking away from something that I'd built. Once again, I've often found in my life, making the decision that's not popular or not popular wisdom, to me, ends up being the decision I need to make. And so I made that decision and had to get comfortable walking away from the money and unwinding everything, and then just mentally convincing myself, that I had enough money, and that even though I didn't necessarily know what I was going to do, I needed to step away and give myself time and space to figure it out.
The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/077. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check out the show notes if you want to learn more about Grant or the things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Today I want to talk side hustles. My avocation is playing guitar. I enjoy doing this for fun, but occasionally I get paid to perform at somebody's wedding, party, or corporate event. It's a lot of fun. So think about your hobbies or things that you enjoy doing. Is there anything that you can turn into a side business? If not, let's take a look at past Inspired Money episodes for some inspiration. Now, number 1 is blogging. Grant Sabatier in this episode is a prime example. If you have a passion for writing and a topic that you love, launching a blog might be your thing. Grant makes $10,000 per month on advertising and affiliate revenue at his Millennial Money blog. A second side hustle worth considering is starting an online business, selling products on Amazon. Do you have a product to sell? What if you don't want to set up a storefront? An Amazon FBA account, that stands for Fulfillment by Amazon, is like eBay or Craigslist on steroids. Amazon has a huge marketplace of buyers. The process is really pretty simple. You source products to sell through retail stores, thrift stores, from around your house, or even from overseas. You list these products on Amazon through your seller account and set prices. Typically, the product details and pictures are already there for you. You ship all of the items to Amazon at once, and then Amazon finds buyers, packages and ships each individual item, collects payment, deducts their fees, and then sends you money twice per month. If you want to create an Amazon store but have no idea what to sell, Listen to Inspired Money episode 13, How to Create Side Hustles That Can Out-Earn Your Full-Time Job. Gerald Zingraf talks about creating niche products that he sells on Amazon. He even shares tools and tactics that got him to over 7 figures in side hustle revenue. And finally, our third example today is photography. If you enjoy photography as a hobby, you could make it into a side hustle. In episode 48, How I Saved $100,000 Right Out of College, Bola Sekunbi shared how she started a wedding photography side hustle. It was great because she could do it while working full-time, since photography is something that she could do on the weekends. She started doing it for free to gain experience, and then she called local photographers asking if they needed an assistant or second photographer. Once she had the experience and skills, she could charge market rates, and those rates were very lucrative. So those are 3 side hustle ideas to get you thinking. Do you need or desire to start a side hustle? Do you have one already? I'd love to hear about it. Tweet me at @RunnyMeetCap, that's RUNNYCAP, or go to the Inspired Moneymakers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. So what's your biggest financial challenge right now? Have you inherited money and aren't sure how to invest it? Maybe you've got an old 401k account. We can help. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy and email me using the web form. I'd love to hear from you, and we can even schedule a call. All right, so now back to the interview. Before the break, Grant was talking about walking away from his agency business, and I followed up by asking him this. What did that process look like internally?
Oh gosh, it was a lot of just internal stress and questioning, being like, God, the voice in my head was like, keep it going, keep it growing, like more employees, more money. Like I projected that in 10 years, I could be making like $2 million a year with my company. And I was like, but then I asked myself, like, what would you even do with all that money? And I couldn't figure out what I'd do with it. I mean, obviously it was like, okay, I could give back, but I didn't enjoy it enough to commit 10 years. I started to feel I'm 30 years old. So all this is like, all these revelations are all crashing together, right? I'm 30 years old. I became a millionaire. I just went through this really intense process to get here. I'm exhausted. I'm on top of this mountain. And then I look up, stop and catch my breath. And I look up and realize that like there's a much larger mountain, and that much larger mountain is like $10 million. And I looked up at it and I was just like, nope. Like I'm not going to go after that.
Did you have to make a pros and cons list, or was that not required?
No, I this is like not like, this isn't like a one day thing. This is like a 6-month process where I was like, okay, where do I want to be when I'm 40? And I'm like, I don't want to be at 40 even more exhausted and have more money. You know what I mean? Like I'm not willing to make that trade-off. It was at this time that, I lost a couple of friends to suicide. I had a friend who had cancer. It was like a confluence of like 30 years old millionaire recognizing your mortality. And then probably the factor that pushed everything over the edge was in 2016. So I had the blog now for a year. I started to get some actual traction and people started reading it. And I started to get emails from readers, and I remember the first one I got that really shook me, and it was like, Grant, you saved my life. I saved $13,000 this year. This is at the end of 2016. I just want to thank you for all that you're doing for us. On behalf of everyone out there. Like keep going, Grant. And I was like, that email, and then I started getting more of those emails. Those emails filled me with a level of joy that was beyond anything I'd ever felt before. Better than any dollar amount, better than that $25,000 check or $50,000 project. I mean, it was so much greater. It honestly hit me like a wall of bricks. I didn't even recognize. I was like, why do I feel this way? This is so new to me. And I kind of leaned into that feeling and was like, whoa, like this is what you need to be doing.
Yeah, you want more of that.
Exactly. And so that made the decision, okay, I need to walk away from this. And then I flipped and, we grow up being told like, what's your purpose? Find your mission. What do you want to do in all these things? And I actually found those questions really stressful because I didn't have a purpose in life. I didn't have a mission. I didn't have a why. You know what I mean? My why was like making money to escape, which is fine if that's your why, but I didn't really feel like I had a core why. And then with those emails, I didn't find my purpose. My purpose arrived. And I had a lens with which to filter decisions through, and was like, oh, I want more of that feeling, and I want to help more people. And the more people I reached, the more emails I got, the more joy I felt, and it was a cycle. And then I was like, I can really, really, help people in their lives. I can really, really help people. And so I doubled down. I started blogging more. I ended up, one of my pieces went viral, and someone at CNBC found it, and she wrote about me. And then I was in the Post and on NPR, and then the book agents came and the television agents. And the more that I leaned into my mission, which was simply, help people feel less stressed about money in their life. And I also believed that the finance and the personal finance industry was a large driver of the stress about money in people's lives, because I'd found through this whole process that a lot of the stuff shared out there, was either so-so advice or damaging advice or scammy advice. And so I really felt empowered to, I didn't need any money. Once again, now I'm at a point in my life where I have nothing to lose. And so I have nothing at stake. And so I was like, I can throw myself into this fully and try to help as many people as I can. And that's what I did. And the more that I did that, the more, it's one of those things where I don't know if you're religious or anyone out there. I grew up Baptist, and now I have, complicated relationships with traditional religions. But I truly believe that there are energies and things going on in this world that we don't understand. I'll go as far to say that. And this is one of those things where it's like synchronicity, the opportunities. I wrote, this is crazy. In February 2017, this is like you can't even write this. February 2017, CNBC story blew up, and then they did a follow-up story on, what are those books that really helped you on your journey that other people can read? And I said, there's only one book, and it's the best book on money, period. Your Money, Your Life. And I just mentioned it. And then they wrote an article about that and how Millennial Millionaire says this is his favorite book and, best book on money, period. And February 2017, that article also went viral as the number one story on CNBC's site, and it pushed the book to number one on Amazon worldwide that day. Number one on Amazon worldwide. 2 days later, I get a message, an email from Vicki Robin, the co-author, saying, thank you, in huge caps, exclamation point, I want to thank you for this, She pasted the article. I'm so happy the book helped you. Would love to connect on Skype. And that was it. And I about fell out of my chair. And I connected with her on Skype. We really hit it off. This is the author of my favorite book of all time, the book that changed my life. Here I am talking to her on Skype. And, you can't make that up. And we became close and are still incredibly close today. We're working on a number of projects. We've been writing a book together, and she wrote the foreword to my book, and I'm trying to continue and build on her work. And, that's just one example of hundreds where the universe, or whatever you call it, God, whatever you want to name it, is supporting me. I feel in this mission, and so the more I lean into it, from the book deal to my editors, like the editor for the Dalai Lama and all these people, and Penguin, biggest publisher in the world. I mean, it's like stuff of dream. Like I feel incredibly grateful, and for this opportunity to share. And the more that I lean into it, the more that opens up. And so I know there's some force so much greater than me at play here. And yeah, I'm just trying to help as many people as possible just have less stress around money and all that means. And it's forcing me to evolve and grow and change. And the biggest revelation that I've had even recently is the tactics are just the beginning. I wrote everything that I think someone needs to know about money, and my story in Financial Freedom, my book. And now what I realized is, of all the emails I get, I've been analyzing them. I have over 17,000 reader emails in one Gmail folder. And I've analyzed them, and the one common thread, the one thing that almost all of them say is, "You inspired me." And that's something that I didn't even think about this entire time, was that, whoa, like the idea of inspiring people, it's a responsibility I don't take lightly. I take it very seriously. And now I'm in the process of like unpacking that. Like, what does it mean to inspire someone? How can you support them after inspiring them? Because inspiration is just a spark. After you help someone like wake up a little bit, how can you help them get to the next level? And so now this whole process is, I'm growing, I'm expanding, and I feel very grateful to be able to do this. I mean, it truly is, I feel, what I'm meant to do.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And it really is almost incredible. With Vicki Robin, author of Your Money, Your Life, writing the foreword of your book. And I want to read this short passage from her foreword. She writes, "Grant's bigger point, though, is that making a lot of money isn't the point. Time is. Time for love, for learning, for caring, for playing, for contributing to others. That's what you are buying through becoming an effective and efficient earning machine." You're a very philosophical guy. The money is central. Like, you're trying to teach people not to stress about money, to think radically differently about money. But then at the end of the day, it's not all about the money.
Yeah, isn't that funny? The most important question that the financial world has is, how much money do you need? And what I encourage people to do in the book and in what I'm doing is, that's not the first question. The first question is, what kind of life do you want to live? And then, how much money do you need to live that life? And money is infinite. You can always go out and make more money. Anyone can. You can go out and get a part-time job. You can get a second job. You can drive for Lyft or Uber. You can always go out and make more money. You're not going to get back your time. This moment is all there is. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I think one of the biggest things holding people back that I realized is that they think time is money. But time is so much more than money. And as long as you think that time is money and money is time, it's going to hold you back in some way. You're going to make sacrifices. You're going to stay late at the office or stay at the office all weekend and to make more money, when in reality you're doing it to spend more time with your kids, and you could already do that today.
Grant, I've heard you talk in different interviews and read some of the things that you've written, because personal finance isn't that complicated, right? When you look at personal finance, you can either save, and you did that. You bought a $800 Nissan. You lived in the less than stellar apartment because you could save more money. You could bank it. You can also try to earn more, and you were very effective in doing that. You had multiple revenue streams, and then you also invested. So it's really like three buckets. And in different interviews, it depends. Like, I've heard you stress saving, and then I've also heard you stress you can make more because there's unlimited upside. Like, for someone who's first starting, what do you tell them? Like, where's the area that they can make the biggest impact, or low-hanging fruit?
That's a good question. So in the book, I specifically talk about how the real power is certainly in making those small decisions, but it's the compounding benefit of a few decisions. And so it's like the benefits are really stackable. So something as simple as the direct correlation between the number of years it's going to take you to reach financial independence and your savings rate, which is how much money you're saving, the percentage of your income that you're saving. Going from, say, saving 5% to 30%, you've cut at least a decade off of the time it's going to take you to retire. And so your savings rate is one of those things that very, very few people actually monitor. And you can monitor your savings rate. I encourage you in the book to do it in two ways, both the dollar amount and the percentage amount, because some people respond differently to dollar amounts than they do to percentages. So it's important to think about it in both ways. And so trying to increase your savings rate, the easiest way to do that, there's two ways. The first is that, we live in a world that tells you to budget and tells you to cut back on all those small little purchases. But it's often those small little purchases in your life, the glass of wine or the manicure or the coffee, those little things are often the things that give you the most joy and make you the happiest. And so you shouldn't cut back those things. Where you should cut back, the way you get your savings rate from 0% or 5% to 30% is you save on housing, transportation, and food. The average American spends over 70% of their income on those three things: housing, transportation, and food. And so that's where you get the big savings. That's why I moved to a less than stellar apartment. That's why I drove, the $800 Nissan Maxima, because those two categories are, no matter how detailed you are in your tracking, like even I moved to New York City 6 months ago, and, I ran all the numbers because that's who I am. But philosophically, I knew above all else, I need to control my housing cost. And so I spent the extra time finding an affordable apartment that I would love, because I knew the net impact of that, even without running the numbers, would be the greatest. And so I encourage you to, get a roommate, move to a smaller apartment, move to a different neighborhood, even move in with your parents. None of this has to be forever. This can be a short-term situation. I mean, you can do it for 2 years and you're going to save a ton of money. It's going to have a huge impact over time. And so that's how you get your savings rate up. You move to a smaller apartment or get a roommate. And all of a sudden, if you save that difference, you've gone from saving 5% of your income to 25%. You've cut a decade off of your retirement. And that's making one decision, moving somewhere differently. And then the second thing is, as I mentioned, we spend so much time budgeting and being told to cut back on all these little things, but you actually have control over your life. I mean, you can choose what to buy and what not to buy. And what I mean by that is, you can only cut back in so many ways, and, maybe cut back to where you're pretty comfortable, and then say, okay, I'm comfortable enough, I'm happy enough. I'm going to go out, and instead of trying to spend more and more time cutting back or hunting for that deal, I'm going to start finding ways to make more money, because there's a limit to how much you can cut back, not a limit to how much money you can make. And a lot of people just accept what they're getting paid. Most people think they deserve a raise, but they don't ask for one, is a simple example. Most people could make money on the side in their extra time doing something that they love, but they don't go out and do it. And so, instead we get burnt out on our jobs. And so we come back, and the average American watches over 5 hours of television a night. And then that's how we spend our time. And so we spend so much time trading it for our full-time income, and then don't spend any time actually looking for other ways to make money. And then the final thing that I talked about, time is not money, money is not time. And so one of the things you have to do is, if you're always trading your time for money, you're not going to make as much as possible. And a simple way to make money in no time or very little time is to invest as much as you can. And so, in the book I talk about, Warren Buffett famously makes $1.5 million per hour even when he's sleeping. And I make about $45 an hour even when I'm sleeping, just for my investments. And so my money is making money without me having to trade any of my time. So time is no longer money in that sense because I'm not trading anything for it. And the same thing is if you have a business or want to have a business, your company is set up to make money for people at the top, and they're getting a margin, they're getting a multiple on your time. And so one of the things you have to realize is that your boss and your company, they're probably trying to pay you as little as possible for your time so they can make the most money. That's how companies work. That's how they grow. That's why they're in business. That's the foundation of capitalism. And so you have to actually then use that to your advantage and become what I call a little Uber. And you have to think like Uber they don't drive cars. They're not out driving around cars. All they're doing is they're facilitating and connecting supply and demand. So people who need rides, they're matching them with people who will give rides. And you need to become a little Uber in your life. And instead of trading your own time for money, you need to go out and find something where you can be the connector between supply and demand. So don't walk dogs yourself. Start your own little dog walking company and hire other people to do it, because you can only walk dogs for 12 hours a day, but you should spend that time building a business and hiring others to walk the dogs, because then you're selling their time, not your own. So all of a sudden you have 3 dog walkers who each walk for 10 hours a day. You have 30 hours of walk time and you didn't have to trade any of it. It's time that you're selling someone else's time and making money off someone else's time instead of your own. So those are some simple mindset shifts that to me had the biggest impact on my life. And then when you combine all those things, the power is just exponential. And this is one of the reasons with the book, a book like this hasn't been written, because it's equal parts personal finance, entrepreneurship, and investing. And the publishing industry actually doesn't want you to write a book like that because they classify investing books as investing books. It's a clean classification. Whereas I wrote a book about 3 topics all in one, because for me, it's those 3 topics that had the biggest impact. It's all of them together that made this possible. I call it the enterprise mindset, which is simply finding as many ways to make the most of your money as possible in the book. And that's something that I had to do all 3 of those things: manage money well, become an entrepreneur in my own way, and then invest. That's what gave me the X factor. And it's doing all those things which helped me make more money in less time. And so I was no longer wasting time. I was using it to its full advantage.
Great advice. And you're proof that it can work. As your priorities have changed over time, I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
Yeah, success for me, I'll tell you just a real quick story. I defined success this entire journey by how much money I had and by becoming financially independent. And I didn't realize what success actually meant to me until 8 months after leaving the corporate world. I was actually working on the book, and I went to Cornwall, England, which is like it's kind of in the southwest of England. It's like one of the westernmost, if not the westernmost part of Europe, and rented an Airbnb. And I was writing, and woke up one morning. I was having my coffee, and very beautiful day, hummingbirds and flowers. And, I was looking out at the ocean and I had a weird feeling. And I was like, what is this? What is this feeling? And, something that I'd never felt before. And I realized it was the first moment in my life when I'd truly been at peace. And that this was what I was seeking all along. It was this feeling. I had nowhere to be but there. It was, and that really was a revelation for me, because I realized that's what I was looking for all along. And that success for me wasn't about money. It was about peace. And, I don't know in hindsight now if I could have, had more peace in my life earlier on. I write a lot in the book about you don't need millions of dollars or even to be financially independent to have more time and space and freedom in your life. Probably even a year in, when I had $300,000 and, over $200,000 saved and invested, I had more freedom. I didn't necessarily feel more free because I wasn't mindful of it. And so I encourage people to, even if you think you need millions of dollars and all these things, look around with where you're at and think about what you already do have. Because the only thing that we take from place to place and job to job, the only thing that's always with us is ourselves. And so finding ways in your life to create that peace earlier on, I encourage you to find ways to do that, because I ended up feeling like I had to go and make millions of dollars and become financially independent to find something on the other side of the rainbow. And that's where I did find it. But, I probably could have found it maybe a little bit earlier.
Well, you've kind of lived like 3 or 4 lifetimes, I feel like, and you're still young.
I do feel that way. I do really feel like I'm kind of in the bonus round of my life, which is weird to say, but I do feel that way. I feel like I've lived a few different lives, and that's what's most exciting, because I feel like when you think about what's next, I feel like I've done so much that what's next will only be greater. It feels like levels. Like I've gotten to a different level in life, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen next year in the future, but that's what excites me most, because truly living is not knowing.
That is amazing. Congratulations on the new book, Financial Freedom. I encourage all the Inspired Money listeners to pick it up. There's a lot of practical information there, more of your story in there. Can you tell the Inspired Money listener where they can follow you, find your book, and find more about you?
Yeah, so check out financialfreedombook.com to learn more about the book. You can search for Financial Freedom on Amazon. It's the bright blue book. Check it out, pick it up. Let me know what you think. At Financial Freedom on Instagram is a great way to reach me, and at Millennial Money on Twitter. If you want to read the blog, you want to read some blog posts, check out millennialmoney.com. I think the book is better than the blog. It's like 10x the blog, so you're going to get the highest ROI just reading the book. And then check out the Financial Freedom podcast everywhere that podcasts are. That's the podcast supporting the book. Tony Robbins was on my podcast. It's a great episode. And so that's the best way to follow me. But check out the book, because honestly, I put everything that I think that I know about money, that I've learned about money, that I think is going to have the highest ROI. That was my goal, to write the highest ROI money book in the game. And really can't wait for you to read it, and let me know what you think.
Grant, you've done big things, and I think you're going to be doing bigger things. So thank you for stopping by to share with us.
Hey, it means a lot to me. Thanks for your support and having me on, and I hope you have a good day.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love that Grant never wavered in his faith and ability to take control of his finances in life. He's an example of being resourceful. In his case, he saw the Google Ads certification as a way to find a job and later launch his own business. Even if you feel like you don't have a skill or companies don't want to hire you, keeping an open mind to all possibilities is important. Keep trying, because it's likely that you'll find a way. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment and takeaway, let me know by going to inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Let's continue the conversation there. I appreciate you joining me and being a part of this mission to make our money more inspired. If you got inspired today, please open your podcast player right now and leave a review. I'd really appreciate it. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Aloha, Kimo. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.